take a look at this argument. If no cash bail is implemented, then crime will increase. If crime increases, then citizens will feel less safe. Therefore, if no cash bail is implemented, then citizens will feel less safe. So we can represent this argument symbolically by assigning our simple statements letters. We're going to go with N, C, and S, and when we write this out on a single line, we notice something right away. This argument is comprised entirely of conditional statements. The premises and the conclusion are all horseshoes. Okay, so we're going to test this argument for validity by assuming our conclusion is false, all of our premises are true, and we're going to deduce all of our logically necessary truth values, and when we do, we run into a problem. Okay, the second premise has C is true and S is false, and we know that that combination of true-false values would mean that the horseshoe is false, and we're assuming it's true. So we've got a contradiction here, which is a good sign. That means this argument is valid. It's not possible for the conclusion to be false when all the premises is true. This argument has a name. It's a pure hypothetical syllogism, or an HS, and any argument that adheres to the pure hypothetical syllogism form is valid. The form of a pure hypothetical syllogism looks like this. We have all conditional statements in our argument. And we have one of the statements that's shared by the premises being passed off or linked to the next premise. So you can see here that imagine you're running a marathon and you're running with your letter Q all the way down at the end, and then you pass it off to your second premise, and then the second premise keeps running with it, and then in the conclusion we have the other two statements that comprised the two premise statements being linked together by another horseshoe. Okay, now you might think about these as linked in a chain, or links in a chain, or I mixed my metaphors and talked about it as a baton being passed. But what we want to keep in mind is that it doesn't matter what the order of the premises are, okay? Just like with the disjunctive syllogism, the premises might come to us in a different order. And maybe when they come to us in this different order, the linking of the chain isn't quite so obvious, okay? And so what we want to do when the premises come to us in this order is maybe flip them into this order so that we can then recognize, oh yeah, I see one of the statements is being carried over into that next premise statement. What we really want to watch out for is when that chain gets broken or that baton doesn't get tossed. I need to stop mixing metaphors. Okay, so when we have that shared statement in the premises appearing both at the end of the conditional statements or both at the beginning, that's going to result in an invalid argument. Okay? So take a look at this argument. If you're watching John give a lecture, then you're learning. If you're listening to a logic lecture right now, then you're learning. Therefore, if you're watching John give a lecture, then you're listening to a logic lecture. Okay, so when we symbolically represent this argument, we'll use J, you're watching John give a lecture, Y, you're learning, and L, you're listening to a logic lecture right now. It's a lot of L's there. And when we symbolically represent this argument, we get J horseshoe Y, L horseshoe Y, J horseshoe L. And we just go back and we look. Which of these argument forms does this expression of our argument seem to reflect or match? And we can see here that we've got our shared statement Y appearing over here at the end of both of our premise statements. And that tells us, okay, you didn't link your shared term. You didn't pass the baton from one statement off to the next by having the final statement of one premise appear as the first statement of another premise. Therefore, you've attempted a pure hypothetical syllogism, but you didn't do it right. It's an invalid hypothetical syllogism. Okay, now look at this one. If you're learning, then you're listening to a logic lecture. If you're watching John give a lecture, then you're learning. Therefore, if you're watching John give a lecture, then you're listening to a logic lecture. Okay, so again, we represent our argument symbolically, and now we have Y horseshoe L, J horseshoe Y, J horseshoe L as our conclusion. And again, we just go back to our forms. Which one of these forms does this argument seem to match? And the answer, of course, is this one. Okay, and again, it doesn't look like these are linked in the way that they need to be, because we don't have the last statement of one statement being picked up as the first statement, but really we actually do, because if we just reversed the order of the premises, this Y would become the final statement of our first premise, and it would get picked up by this statement in our second premise. So this is a valid pure hypothetical syllogism.